Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 646. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge. I'm not joined this episode by my co-host Jim Segulin as usual because of the fact that due to some scheduling difficulties, we were not able to record an episode together this week. And rather than not come to you with a brand new Raging Bullets, I figured I'd do a little blogging today. I'm going to talk about some books that I really enjoyed over the last week that were some ones that really struck me. There's going to be some light spoilers this episode. I'm going to tease what's going on in the stories, give you some of the first few pages so that way you know the premise of the story. If there's something that I feel is really strong that you need to know in order to understand why you should be picking up a certain issue. There's some books that I've caught up on. There's some classic reads that I enjoyed. All of this is stuff that I've read this week, so it's really fresh in my mind, things that I'm really passionate about that I enjoyed that I'm trying to pass on to you. I hope you enjoy this as a brief little fill-in episode until we get to next week's recording. We're not going to be skipping anything that we've promised, we're just delaying it a week. We are sponsored as always by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com, and DCBService.com is your comic book, your statue, your figures, pre-order source, really anything pop culture related. DCB Service carries, and you can pre-order them. If it's in the previews catalog, you can grab it over at DCBService.com at an amazing discount. InStockTrades.com is your collected edition source. Hardcovers, trade paperbacks, you name it, they've got it over at InStockTrades.com. They are a co-sponsor to our current contest. Our current contest is going to be ending midnight, June 8th. And it's basically a participation contest. And whether you participate in the Facebook group, voicemails, sending us parodies, comic strips, Where's What Nows, reviews, emails, anything that you've participated in from May 8th through midnight June 8th will count. We have 3 prizes that we're handing out this time, and basically the first person's going to get to choose first, second person gets to choose second, and the third person gets to choose what's left. We have some really cool books in this particular contest, starting with the Animal Man Omnibus Hardcover, Batman Earth 1 Complete Collection Trade Paperback, and the Superman 78 Hardcover. So you'll be able to choose from those 3 items as a part of this contest. This really is meant to be a way to get us contests going a little bit more regularly again, but also as a thank you to those of you that have been listening and participating in the show in so many ways. If there is something that you think between that May 8th and June 8th is your way of participating and you've been doing it, shoot me an email. My goal here is really to provide everyone an opportunity. Please shoot me that email, though, before midnight June 8th, so it counts. My goal is to keep this pretty open and loose. It's really meant to be a thank you to those of you that are listening regularly and just doing things to support the show. We really do appreciate you. So without further ado, let me jump into the segment where I share some things that I've been reading this week that I think you'll enjoy.
Carter Hall, scientific genius from a far-off world, flies into action as Hawkman.
I wanted to talk a little bit this episode about the work of John Paul Leon. And apologies for any name butchery there. John Paul Leon was the artist most recently on the Batman Catwoman special, which was an origin story. It was it's actually called an interlude. It's an origin story of Catwoman, a retelling of the origin story that adds some really cool elements to a back history to Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle. It adds some more backstory to her relationship with the Joker, her early relationship with Batman. He did the artwork on pages 1 to 13 and the breakdowns for 14 to 20 before he passed. And I didn't realize that this was released after he passed. As I went through and I was doing my catch-up on some of the work that I haven't had a chance to read, this is one of the books that I came across. I'm like, I never got around to reading that one. I started to realize that this issue wound up being a really cool tribute to him because there's a Batman black and white story that he did. There's a really cool question story that he did that's contained within. So if you missed this special, it's worth picking up, not only for the great Batman story with Selina Kyle, the Joker, and Bruce, but these 2 other stories that are contained within. I've been greatly enjoying Batman Catwoman, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about the issue number 11 that came out recently, but I'm going to focus right now on John Paul Leon's work because there's a couple of things that I've read recently because I enjoyed this so much. The neat part about this particular issue, I mentioned that there is a tribute to him. There's page breakdowns. There is work by Michael Davis writing and talking about John Paul Leon. Kurt Busiek did a great piece talking about John Paul Leon. But there's this Riddler Batman Black and White story that is contained within. It's really great because it's one of those stories where it's so focused on the Riddler that you're wondering, where's Batman going to pop in? Their relationship is always intriguing because there's always this really cool mystery element of the Riddler trying to one-up Batman and Batman having to use some strategy, some smarts to get ahead of the Riddler. He finds out that these cases are happening and it's not enough to just go and stop the Riddler after the fact. He has to use the clues, use the riddles to get ahead of him. And this is one of those great stories, like any of the Batman Black and White stories, that encompasses that. So that's definitely a reason to pick this up. The Question story was a real surprise for me because I was making my way through and there's some cool art tributes to John Paul Leon from a wide variety of who's who in the art realm. The Question story is this really deep one. It's called The Questions, Reflections of the Heart. Ram V was the writer. John Paul Leon did the art and colors. And the neat part about this story is it focuses on this idea of there is the son of a mobster who he had a duplicate, somebody who looked just like him, who the idea was to be his bodyguard, to protect him, to prevent anybody from putting a hit out on him. Well, what happens when this man falls for his duplicate, his bodyguard? The father wants to hide that relationship, doesn't want that to happen. Basically, there's the homophobia piece, things like that that's associated with that. The duplicate assumes that it is the son that was out to take him out, the son that was out to get rid of him. And in reality, it wasn't. But the son can't have that person continue to be alive because he knows too much. Vic Sage is left with this real conundrum on how to handle this particular piece. It's something where you're dealing with love and murder and Vic Sage crossing this moral line. The Question stories always have this question of there's this morality component to them. It's real deep, and it felt like a Denny O'Neil written Question story. The art is phenomenal and very well rooted. And the cool thing about all three of these stories, you get to see John Paul Leon's artwork portrayed in three very different stories with three very different tones to them. So it's something that really just captivated me. This captivated me to the point where I didn't stop my reading with this particular special. I jumped from this to Batman Creature of the Night. And it's something that I missed. It came out in 2017. It was Kurt Busiek, John Paul Leon. And the idea behind this was it's set in a world where Batman is a fictional character. DC Comics are a thing. And there is this young boy named Bruce Wainwright whose parents are killed. He loses his parents in a violent crime. But it's a real world where no superheroes exist. So what happens when you've got this kid in 1968 Boston, Massachusetts, who has an uncle his name's not Alfred, but if you take his first name, his middle name, and his last name, put them together, you can take elements of it, and he becomes his Alfred. This kid is us. He grew up, really loving Batman, obsessed with comics. It's what he goes into as he's grieving. He dives into the comic book world. He's lucky enough that his parents had money, and that money was turned into investments that allow him to survive. But you see this kid who has been orphaned trying to live with being an orphan in the real world and the alienation and the being alone in that aspect. But what happens when he's got this rage building in this 4-issue series of seeing injustice, and he wants to act. He wants to take what he's learned from comics and have art imitate life, where now all of a sudden these things become, he can take the lessons of comics and use his money to somehow help that. Not just the money, he wants to take action against the people that can harm others. The messages that he's gotten from Batman, the in his mind, the positive messages that he's gotten from Batman and rebel against it. It's great because something starts to manifest. I don't want to say too much about it because if you haven't read this, you should seek it out. There's something to this story. There's a specter to this story of what happens when this emotion starts to manifest itself and starts to bleed over into the real world. It's cool. It's a really great story. It wasn't what I expected at all. I don't know how I missed this one. Usually when there's a Batman mini-series or a Batman special series like this, I jump on them. And I owned this, so it was easy for me to pull this one out and kind of go, oh, geez, I never read this, and enjoy it. And it was truly because of I realized that this artist had passed from a cancer battle during the creation of the Batman Catwoman special, that I'm like, I want to know more about him, and sought out this story that I haven't read. I cannot recommend this enough. It's a very cool, very different story. So that's Batman Creature of the Night. It was a 4-issue series, very easy to get in hardcover, paperback, individual issues, or on Comixology, digitally. It's very easy to seek this one out. But I just want to recommend the work of the artist, John Paul Leon. If you read that Batman Catwoman special, or if you didn't, grab that and seek that out because of the black and white story in the question. But follow that up with reading Batman Creature of the Night. Just some great books. And I thought this was a good week for me to shout these out because they were some things that I enjoyed this week that were surprises for me, and I always love when I have the opportunity to shout some of these things out. One of the other issues that I wanted to shout out, and I mentioned recently on the show that I was going to be seeking out some work of George Perez to read, and I thought I was going to jump right back to New Teen Titans and Wonder Woman. Instead, I went first to something that, if I read it in '89, it's been so long that I don't remember reading the issues. It was Action Comics 643. This is when Superman was returning to Action Comics. George Perez had just taken over for story and breakdowns. Brett Breeding was doing the finished artwork. Superman was just coming back to Metropolis, and I loved the way that the opening of this was written. You get to see Superman in this majestic George Perez artwork atop the Daily Planet building. He's also talking about Metropolis and smelling the air and just how being home was something that he could relate to. And you were getting to see Metropolis through Superman's eyes, through his senses. It opens up with him talking about the pollution of the big city, reminiscing about just everything that there is to see, soaking it in because there was this feeling of belonging that came out of that. That just was something, we all relate to this. If we've moved away from where we grew up, or you have a chance to go back and visit it, and there's something different about areas that are familiar to you, that you have an emotional history to, that just give you that sense of being home. There's something about home. This really had that feel to it. It was just terrific writing and obviously the brilliant artwork. Some of my favorite moments of this are the attention to the small details. He has this great reunion with Jimmy and Perry, where he's genuinely excited to see Jimmy. He's been away for a long time, and there's this sense of, I don't even know if I was going to make it back. This sense of wonder, like at flight, where he's excited to be home, and you see like the majesty of him flying around, but it's a different kind of flight than we're usually seeing of Superman. Perry White catches it, where it's almost like this appreciation of being back in the city. This is all conveyed through dialogue and a great marriage of amazing art. And it's funny, I talk a lot about my love for George Perez's work on Teen Titans and his Wonder Woman run. I'm looking at this and I'm like, geez, this is on the same level of what I was enjoying then. I don't remember this. I'm sure I probably read it in '89. It's just, I feel like the reaction should be some familiarity to it. I gotta say, it held up really, really well. I've been reading this on the DC Infinite app, and I'm going to continue on this run because it feels new to me. It feels like new George Perez artwork and storytelling at a time where he was just, I'm short list of all-time favorites for what he's done and what he's delivered. And I'm just really enjoying this visit into his version of Superman. This story has it all. It has this Eradicator artifact from Krypton, which we've seen recently in the Superman and Lois TV show. There's also a cool bit with Morgan Edge, where Morgan Edge is using a robot that is attacking where Lois Lane and Jose are at. This is all put together by Desaad without the knowledge of Darkseid, but Morgan Edge thought he was working with Darkseid because of the deception that is Desaad. It's got all these cool elements. This was during one of those eras where Action Comics then led into Superman number 34, then led back into Action Comics. So there's some cool elements of continuation of story, continuation of continuity that was going on at this time. I'm going to keep following this. I really enjoyed this first issue and this first foray into this. The artwork is stunning, and the storylines are great. It is a journey into an era that is 89. I keep acting like that's so recent just because it was in my lifespan, but it's really not. This is when I graduated from high school. So it was an issue that really struck me as being a lot of fun. I thought it was worth shouting out on this episode. I read this week for the first time Batman FaZe Clan #1. I wanted to shout this story out because it's a really contemporary story that's pretty cool. The idea is that Edward Nygma has created this thing called the Nygma Box, which is his game console system, that he's using this and rolling it out to the general public as a way to get into their heads through using virtual reality, and then to scan and manipulate their brainwaves. So he's using it as a way of mind control. Batman is really operating out of his element. Obviously brings in Tim Drake, brings in Oracle. The suggestion comes of bringing in the FaZe Clan. So now we're bringing in the gamer community to help out because this would be the area of expertise. So it's Batman and the Bat family teaming up with the FaZe Clan in a virtual world that they would know and understand. It was a really cool crossover story. I don't want to spoil the whole thing other than to shout out the fact that it was something that for me, I didn't know, admittedly, I didn't know who the FaZe Clan was until this. Now I'm very interested and intrigued by them. Definitely an esports gaming community that I was drawn to because of this particular story. And crossovers should do that. They should be something where if you're coming at it because you're a comic fan, if you're coming at it because you're a gamer, the story should give you access to both worlds, give you enough that you're intrigued by both worlds. And this did that. It was a single one-shot issue, so it's a great story that's very accessible. I didn't know who FaZe Clan was until this particular story, but I've become a fan because I saw him team up with the Bat family. And they had the right kind of written reaction to that team up, and their way of being effective as team members was, because this took place in a virtual world, they were leveled up by Oracle to then take on roles that would be in like Team Fortress and other games that require first-person shooters that require there to be a healer, require there to be a tank. All the kind of things that you would see in MMOs, for example, that were roles are present in this story. And I loved that, how they have a skill set that brought them to the table that would have them be effective, while at the same time Batman and his team were effective because they're used to fighting villains like the Riddler and the Riddler's end bosses in each of these levels that have these artifacts that they need to get a hold of are Batman's rogues. So there were 4 key Batman rogues that were contained in this story that were virtual representations of these rogues that Batman and the FaZe Clan were going up against. It was a race against time that involved team-ups between the Bat family and the FaZe Clan. It was just neat. It was a cool story. Something that I totally read that I'm like, I kind of want to read this just to see what it is, figuring that it's either going to be something that really interests me or something that wasn't for me. This was for me. It was very cool. And I've become a fan of FaZe Clan because of it. So it was a neat little story. I did read Batman Catwoman issue number 11, so I want to jump back to that series real quick. And Jim and I will talk about the wrap-up of this series when it comes out, issue number 12. But if you haven't been reading Batman Catwoman, I think one of the things I like the most about it is it touches on the relationship between Batman and Catwoman throughout the life of Catwoman. So it deals with her being very young, it deals with them in the Middle Ages, growing old together, multiple time zones, and them in the future, a potential future where they got married and they had a child, Helena. There also deals with the fact that Selina has this relationship with the Joker, this crazy, toxic, weird relationship that yet there's more to it. She understands the Joker in a way that the other rogues don't, almost in a way that Batman doesn't too, and also seems to be understanding more and more the ongoing relationship between the Batman and the Joker in a way that she can look at it objectively because she knows both men. So it's a very different sort of exploration of even the relationship of Batman and the Joker that is really great. Dick Grayson plays a cool role in it. A very future version of Dick Grayson plays a very cool role in this story. We've got the character of Phantasm from Mask of the Phantasm that comes in as a love interest of Bruce Wayne, where Bruce Wayne has to make some interesting choices because of that relationship at a certain point in time in his life too, and his relationship with Catwoman. So there's a lot going on here, and I really loved this idea of each issue having multiple time zones that it's continuing to go through. You see some great mother-daughter moments between Selina and Helena because of some moral choices that are made, and you get to see parts where Helena is her father's daughter. She is Batman, and she's got to deal with understanding a little bit more about her mother, who is not Batman, who is very much Catwoman. I really loved this issue, and I loved catching up on this book because it's one I got a little bit behind on, as I mentioned with the special. And it was neat to get caught up on this one. I'm ready for the ultimate chapter, chapter 12, to really enjoy this. This is a book, if you've been missing Batman and Catwoman, do yourself a favor and pick this series up. It's a lot of fun. It's really cool, especially if you're into the relationship of Batman and Catwoman, seeing their history, their present day, and their potential future playing out in the mind of Tom King. Really well written and some great artwork in this series. The other book I want to shout out this week, and I'll wrap up with this one, it's Batman Fortress #1. This is written by Gary Whitta, with art by Derek Robertson, colors by Diego Rodriguez. The premise of this one is Superman's not around. There's an alien invasion and Batman has to deal with it. This story opens up with one of the cooler sequences I've read in a while, where there's a citywide blackout, and there's 3 thieves that are going to basically rob Wayne Manor. They're under the impression that Bruce Wayne's out of town, so there's going to be an easy score. And this guy knows all about some things, like even the salt shakers are just worth a ton of money because he saw them on Antique Roadshow. So he's like, this is an easy score. We're going to break into this house and we're going to be set for life. So in the middle of this, they go to take off of a bus that's there the pearls, the very famous Martha Wayne pearls. Well, that's when Bruce Wayne's on the scene and says, be careful with those are my mother's. Proceeds to take down 2 of the criminals. Alfred comes in and takes down the 3rd. So you see this great action sequence with Alfred. Really cool opening sequence to this story. One of the thieves at a certain point in time says this line to Batman about how, listen, I'm sorry, I got 5 kids. There's no way you're going to take me in. I can't let you. So that's the one that Alfred took down. And Bruce afterwards, let's get this all mopped up, get the police. But let's also find out if his story checks out about the 5 kids, because I want to do something for the family. We want to take care of them, see if the foundation can do anything. So I like that he's thinking about, I'm taking a father out of the picture. There's a truth to that, and that's the father's fault. But yet I feel an obligation to do something about this, which is so Bruce Wayne, so Batman. In typical Batman fashion, the story does what the best Batman stories do well. They start really intimate with Gotham and work their way outward. They get larger. You start to see there's a bigger problem. This blackout, it seems like at first it was just inhabiting Gotham, but Batman's discovering this is a worldwide phenomenon. Some outside source is causing it. Superman's not showing up on the scene. Batman has no way right now to get the right kind of help and support that he needs, so this is something he has to deal with. There's some really cool bits with Jim Gordon and Bullock and the police in general. This power outage has taken down their radio system. It's taken down their ability to contact Batman without batteries, which they have to come up with a creative solution to use the lights, to be able to throw out the bat signal more than anything else. There's no electricity to drive that, and they need to talk to Batman because of what's going on. The lack of radio communication means that the police, if they go out, in Gotham cannot call for backup, cannot radio in what their status is, cannot radio in what they're seeing. They're out there as basically independent contractors, which is a very dangerous place to be when you're a police officer working in Gotham City. On top of that, there's electric locks that have been outfitted in Arkham that have now failed. And as you can guess, people are getting scared, looting happens, things are in chaos. And again, the bigger picture of this is just the opening salvo. There is a worldwide invasion that is going to be happening. It's a really cool opening to the series with the intimacy, giving you this sense of danger just to Gotham that feels very personal, feels very intimate, and branches outward. This is a neat story that came at a time where I was looking for something different. I'm going to stop here with the story only because I'm teasing this. I don't want to spoil the whole thing. You're going to want to read this. So the first issue's out right now, and it's Batman Fortress #1, a very, very cool story.
Hope this craft can withstand this powerful force.
I'd like to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We love having you part of the show. RagingBullets@gmail.com is our email address. You prefer to contact us that way. RagingBullets.com is our show website, which feeds into Twitter. It feeds into a Facebook fan page. We are proud to be part of an amazing Facebook group community, and I just want to thank everyone that participates there. Actually, the news segments that we have been doing on the normal Speeding Bullets when Jim is on the show, a lot of those have come directly from our Facebook group and the participation of our community, and it means a lot to us that you're taking the time to post there, to really basically act as a team member of Raging Bullets. So thank you so much to everyone that's participating in that particular format. We adore all of you. And if you aren't part of our Facebook group community, please consider popping in there and joining. It's a great community filled with amazing people, and I want to thank everyone again for making that community what it is. We're sponsored, as always, by DCB Service at InStockTrades.com. As I remember, we currently have a contest that is running through midnight of June 8th that is co-sponsored by DCBService.com. So please consider participating in that contest. And I want to thank both of those companies for continuing to support our show. Our next episode, Jim and I are going to be back, and we're going to be talking about Duo, and we're going to talk about Blood Syndicate #1 with our regular episode. We will see you then.
Bye!
All right, you guys. Are you ready to sing your song?
I'd say we are. Yeah, let's sing it now.
Okay, this should be fun. Now get ready for your cue. Okay, Sean?
Okay.
Okay, Jim? Jim? Jim!
Okay. Raging Bullets time is here. We talk about what we hold dear. Comic books and TV shows. Superheroes and their clothes. Justice League and so much more. I just love Green Lantern Corps. We talk about the books we've read with spoilers straight ahead.
Okay, fellas, get ready. That was very good, Sean.
Naturally.
Jim, you're a little flat there, so be careful. Jim? Jim? Jim!
Okay. Justice League and so much more. I still love Green Lantern Corps. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show.
Excellent job, guys.
Let's sing it again. Yeah, let's sing it again.
No, that's enough. Let's not push it.
Push it. What is that? Yeah, what are you talking about?
No, I didn't mean anything by that.
I think
Sean,
you're going to do it
Jim,
I don't know.
how long do you want the song to go?
Look, it's our production.